Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 31st of July 2021, and as usual I urge you to look at Kevin Moore's YouTube channel and specifically his ever-growing series of documentaries based upon the subject of They Call Us Channelers, and he's got some new material up there, so it's worthwhile a look, definitely. He's doing a good job. And he's doing a good job exposing all of the different levels of individual who are metaphysical and channeling information from different levels of sources of information. Excellent information. So let's have a look at the agenda for today's Satsanga. And the first one is a talk on fear and how to master it. And then we've got not as many questions as normal, but these are what I classify as being very good quality questions. And so very poignant questions and very to the point questions, so it's worth, they're very good. I think it's worth spending a little bit longer in answering them to give them the depth of detail that they need to have. And the next meditation was actually to master fear, but I've been given a request to ask us to look at the meditation we've done previously on healing each other. So I think I'm going to add the mastering fear meditation to August's Satsanga, okay, because that will give you time to basically absorb what fear is and how to master it first before we move on to doing a meditation to master it. Okay, so let's have a look at this question about fear. What is it? Well, fear is basically an emotional stroke physical response that we have whilst incarnate surrounding our ability to do something, interact with something, master something, or survive with something. And it's basically something which is created through the ego. Now, the ego, as we know, is a temporary personality that's created as a function of incarnation, where the sentience and the energy that is projected from the true energetic self is, due to the very limited bandwidth as a result of being here in this very low frequency, is almost zero. And so a personality grows as the aspect integrates with the embryo, and then as the embryo grows and then is born, and then the body grows into from adolescence through childhood into adulthood. It becomes that which we are. The aspect starts to associate itself with the body, and that creates the ego as a result of it. Now, the ego is a very clever piece of us, piece of our personality. It's never lost. When the physical form demises and we go back to the energetic, that which is the ego is never lost. It's just absorbed into the rest of the ways in which we've interpreted our environment and the circumstances within our environment, and the ways in which we integrate and interact with others who are incarnate with this environment at all levels of soul level, such as animals and those souls that are in between the human and the animals, the backfield people, and of course the plants and the minerals that are part of the planet Earth. But this ego, it inherently knows that its primary existence, or should we say its existence of command of its environment or the body is limited to the incarnation itself, and so it tries to perpetuate the incarnation for as long as possible. Now, this is all very well and good when we are sort of in the fight and flight scenario, when the ego is useful to us to perpetuate the existence of the gross physical form, the vehicle that we use to incarnate into and experience, learn and evolve and interact with the low frequencies in the only way that they're best interacted with, to give us the same, or give us a level of evolutionary progression associated with it. So it's fine when that happens, when we happen to work on ourselves in a survival mode instinct and all these sorts of things. But when it comes to the spiritual side, it knows that when we work on ourselves, we meditate and we use observer self, and we really start to understand who and what we are, and how a role in a particular incarnation, it starts to work its ways to try and maintain control. Because it knows that when we start to understand who and what we are, we start to understand who and what we are, and therefore the ego dissolves. So the ego doesn't want this. It wants to perpetuate its existence for as long as possible. So it creates a fear, a worry, a concern, an annoyance, a depression, an anxiety surrounding things that would basically elevate us to different frequential levels, and therefore eradicate the need for the ego. So it moves us away from that. So fear is twofold, basically. One, it's a function of the ego to keep us low frequency and perpetuate its existence. And the other one is a means that the ego uses to perpetuate the existence of the physical form if it's in physical danger. For instance, if it's in a very cold environment, you need to keep warm. So it would need to create a condition where it was sheltered. If it's in an extremely hot environment, it would need to find the opposite of that, a place where it could be in the shade and could find water. So fear is something that is really a function of the ego. It's not a function of anything else other than the ego, to perpetuate the human form and therefore perpetuate its existence, whether it's a physical threat or a metaphysical threat to the ego's perpetuation or perpetuated existence in this particular incarnation. So how do we master it? Well, one thing is we recognise what it is. We understand where fear comes from. We understand it comes from this temporary personality that's created as a function of our immersion into a low frequency existence through the use of incarnation to experience that existence. And so once we recognise that, we know that the fear factor is created by a part of us that is trying to control us in some way. Save us, on one hand, from physical harm, but save itself as a secondary function of that, but also save itself from demise if we move into a higher metaphysical frequential state of beingness as well. So once we understand that the ego is a product of our incarnation, and a downstream product of that is its ability to control us by making us concerned, worried, anxious, fearful, then we can start to master it. Because once we understand who and what we are, we know that the aspect of sentience and energy which is projected into the human form is perpetuated. It's always existed from our perspective. It's always existed. It's never not going to exist. It's always going to be part of the true energetic self, our higher self, our oversoul, our Godhead. So when we start to know this and meditate and feel this and understand it, not simply from a belief perspective, but from an experiential perspective, we start to get into the knowledge-based, the experientially based condition of knowingness. And when we know this, there's no way that the ego can control us by making us fearful and bringing our frequencies down, because that's what fear does. It brings our frequencies down. So that's how it controls us and brings us back into control when we're becoming more metaphysically aware and awake, more self-realized. So understanding this, understanding that we are who we are and what we are, means that from a metaphysical perspective we don't fear the demise of the human form. It's nice to perpetuate it because there's lots of things we can do. It's a very privileged condition to be able to incarnate, and we should use the time we have here, whatever time we've agreed on as part of our life plan. And it can be, from a few hours to almost a century or more, that we continue to do that. We don't say, okay, it doesn't matter if I freeze to death in a cold environment in Canada. We get caught out in a snow blizzard. It doesn't matter if we suffer from exposure in in an environment which is desert-like, and the sun's beating down on us, of course we have to try and perpetuate the human form, because we will experience, learn and evolve from that level of being able to survive these extreme conditions or the extreme circumstances. For instance, if you're having to, as some people have, like the Boers, for example, have to leave, Uganda in a rapid way, and there's other sort of asylum seekers who've had to give up everything. People who have been very, very sought after doctors or businessmen have had to leave and come to various other places around the world with nothingness. But their ego has helped them survive. And so they've been able to experience a different sort of experience, a different sort of existence, a different sort of life, whilst in the same life. So, and that isn't lost. All these things that were previously part of their existence, being a successful businessman, being a successful consultant, being a successful lawyer, etc., being a successful engineer, being a successful farmer, isn't lost and gone, because you've experienced that. The next part of the journey is to experience other various levels of existence as a result of the need to flee wherever you've come from. So that part of fear is useful because it gives perpetuate the human form, and it allows us to maximize our potential in this particular incarnation. But it doesn't mean that we should allow fear to rule us. Again, once we understand that our sentience, and the energy that we use to experience and interact with the environments that we're in this instance, animate the human form to experience low frequency interaction, is perpetuated all the time. I'll keep saying this, we never ever cease to exist. We're always in existence. It's just our body, our motor car, our motorbike, our diving suit, if you want to call it that, does get a bit old, a bit of wear and tear. This is normal. We buy a new car when it falls apart or stops working. We buy a new diving suit if we start to have leaks in the seams, for example, if you have a dry suit. It's just the same thing. We then move on to another new car, a new house, a new diving suit, etc., etc., and a new push bike. These sorts of things. So once we understand that we are perpetual, then we don't fear the demise of the physical form, but we respect the need for it to be there. So in this instance, we use the fear that the ego creates to try and perpetuate its existence as a medium for assisting in its existence, not to control it. In terms of the metaphysical side, again, once we understand that our increase in frequency born through meditation, self-work, self-diagnostics, observing ourselves and being of service, creates a higher frequency condition, and we can see who and what we are. Again, we don't need to fear because we know who we are. And we need to recognise the little games that the ego plays to try and put fear into us, such as, I'm worried about leaving my body when you do astral travelling, or samadhi-based meditation. I'm scared about seeing other entities in different frequency levels. I'm scared about seeing astral entities. It's the ego. These things cannot affect us. They can look a bit horrible, but that's because they look into our memory set and they see what we fear, because the ego plants these things that are horrible, that we don't like to see, as being fearful. Certain body types, for instance, lizards, raptors, arachnids, for example, other insects, have what we classify as being an appalling body. But how does our body look to them? Think of it that way. So the ego plucks this out and then feeds it into us. And then that's picked up by some of these other lower frequency astral entities to give them a body type which we fear, so that we don't interact with them and help them back to becoming reintegrated with source energy, for example. Or they use it as a way to control us. So once we understand all of this, then we don't fear going into the lower frequency levels called the astral. We don't fear leaving the body. We don't fear seeing other entities, incarnate or energetic, on the next frequency levels through meditation, or for instance traversing the frequencies or Kriya Yoga. We just accept it as being part of the environment. We know that they're there, so interact with them. And when we interact with them without fear, we can go higher and higher, and again the ego has no control over us. And when we understand all of this, We've mastered fear. Paramahansa Yogananda is quite famous on saying, I don't fear anything. Fear fears me. You could argue that was quite egotistical, but at the end of the day, it's an example of how to be. It doesn't mean you have to be brash or arrogant. It just means you have to understand and work with that understanding, and then you will master fear. Okay, we'll do a meditation in August to master fear, so people can start to work with it and understand it on both the physical level and the metaphysical level as well. Okay, so let's have a look at the questions then. We've got quite a few questions. Again, not as many as normal, but they are, I would say, good quality questions. And this is from DC. Okay, when acting and operating in the physical plane, what is the best we can do without doing too much or too little? Second question is, does everybody get the same amount of evolutionary content, whether we are the protagonist or the antagonist? Does it matter what role we play, for example, the good guy or the bad guy? The first part of this is, can we do, how do we do too much or too little? And the Buddhists have got a very good way of describing this. Let's take the middle way. That is, do what you can do in an efficient and robust and accurate way, and do it at depth. Don't do it at surface level. Don't do lots of stuff at surface level. What do you achieve by that? You achieve lots of stuff at surface level. You don't get the depth and detail surrounding doing a small amount of parts. So doing enough to allow you to do what you're doing in detail is the way forwards. Okay, that's the most important thing. Choose the middle road. Don't do too much, don't do too little. But whatever you do it well, and do it for source. Next question is, does everybody get the same amount of evolutionary content, whether we're the protagonist or the antagonist, the good guy or the bad guy? And the answer is, it depends upon what the life plan is, as to what is expected to be gained from a particular role. And so that's not quite quantifiable in terms of equality. But what I will say is that if we choose a role of antagonist in a particular incarnation, then we will learn from that. Because not plain sailing. Being a bad guy is definitely not plain sailing, and being a good guy is definitely not plain sailing. But each of them will have their own aspects of learning, experience of learning, and evolution associated with them. So, although it might not be the same, you might, in one incarnation, you might get more evolutionary progression as a so-called bad guy than you do as a good guy, and then vice versa in the next one. So it just depends upon the depth of expectation or the plan of the plan for the particular incarnation, and the role we play, as to whether we and how we interact with that role, as to the level of evolutionary progression that we get. Okay, very good. Thank you. Next question is from US. There's 3 of these questions, so let's see how we go. The first one: the Lyrans and Lemurians on the first Earth and this planet practiced and implemented eugenics to create a superior race. This is one of the foundations of the so-called white supremacy in this universe. Is this a correct statement? My understanding is that the use of eugenics or manipulation of DNA structures and the genome was not only done by the Lemurians, but it's also done by the Atlanteans as well, to some levels of significant success. But it's not the foundation of white supremacy. It just happens to be that this particular body form happens to have survived at the moment as a result of being the latest of the body types that have been sort of inserted into the Earth biosphere, so for us to experience, learn, and evolve through incarnation into. If you look at the diversity of body type on the Earth, there are some that have been planted and survived the changes in frequency. Some of them have survived as a result of natural Darwinian evolution, and some of them have basically died out, and we see them as fossils and things. But what we've got now is basically a state of the latest one to be inserted into the the Earth biosphere and frequential levels is the one that is basically the most dominant in terms of its population numbers, which you could argue is what is the Caucasian white, but actually isn't. You know, the Chinese got 1.9 billion people in China, that's not including spread around the world. The Asians, the Indians, and the sort of subcontinents are pretty much the same, and so there really isn't any level of which is particularly superior. It just so happens that one seems to have been quite dominant in the creation of certain exploratory based empires later, rather than them being particularly superior. No one body type is superior because they're just a body type. It's the soul which creates the individual, not the body type. Okay. So it's not a correct statement, and the so-called white skin isn't as prevalent as people expect. A lot of people suggest that there's lots of almost like an Aryan race around the physical universe in the the collective group of the first three frequencies, and the fourth frequency level upwards, such as the Arcturians, etc., etc. But in real terms, they're a small number, and there's lots of other body types which are significantly unhuman, that are probably in more demand from an incarnate level than they are from our perspective on Earth. Okay, so we're quite arrogant as human beings to think that those in the Western world think we are it, and actually we're not. It doesn't matter what body type you've got, wherever you are in the physical universe. If you're incarnating, you're experiencing a benefit that a lot of other souls aren't getting. So we should be grateful. Next question. During your interview a year ago with Beyond the Veil, you may have implied that backfill people and backdrop people are different genres. Is this correct? Please elaborate on the differences. Right. Well, backfill people are in essence a quality of aspect, an aspect of a different quality of sentience than what we classify as the human soul, and it's lower than the human soul in terms of its quality of sentience, but higher than the animal soul, and it's there basically to allow the human aspects to ascend to the next frequential level without there being a shocking and surprising and worrying sudden loss of population around the world. So as one person moves up the frequencies and is able to move into the fourth frequency level while still incarnate, a backfill person is born, or walks into another body, and they have their own opportunity to experience, learn, evolve with the individualized free will, but they don't get many opportunity to do it. Maybe once, maybe twice they get this opportunity to do it, because there's that many of them that are sort of same as us, that we don't get them into the karmic cycle. They tend to have their karma, even depending, irrespective of how good or bad they are from a human perspective, they don't accrue karma. It's wiped out because they're providing a service for us. They're keeping the audience in the cinema whilst the actors do their role still and move, and as each of the audience leaves and goes to the circle, those in the stalls get backfilled by backfill souls. The backdrop people don't actually exist. Now, the backdrop people was something that Dolores Cannon established, and she thought initially that the backfill and the backdrop people were different things. Were the same thing, but not, they're different things. The backdrop people are basically us creating a backdrop to the environment that we're in. Wherever we are, we create an environment that we exist within. We work within it. We collectively sign up to this environment, this reality, this event space, the event stream within the event space that creates the reality. And so we are pretty much localized, except with those around us. So we collectively create that which we desire to see. Housing estates, parks, farms, sea, boats, all these different things. And the individuals that we see in the distance that are part of the background are part of our collective desire to fill those spaces with animate objects, including animals as well. So they're not the same thing. One is created by us and exists on a very temporary basis whilst we're focused on it, and the other is actually a different genre of sentience that is being allowed to incarnate and backfill for those souls who've ascended to the next level. Okay, next question. Kevin Meyerson, who's a psychic, says that Elon Musk, who's done Tesla and SpaceX, and prior to that, PayPal, is the reincarnation of Thomas Edison, and Mark Zuckerberg, whose Facebook is the reincarnation of Herman Hollerith, who did the TMC, the Tabulated Machine Company. Is this true? How are they selected for their role as technology leaders from one lifetime to another? Can you tell from there about their test location, their plan, their role? My feeling is, and what I've just been picking up as I've been reading it, is that their tests are different in terms of the Elon Musk tests and the Mark Zuckerberg tests are different, but the aspects that were projected from those tests did do the Edison and did do the Hollerith incarnations. So the information that came from those aspects went back into their true energetic self, and the innovation, supposedly, or the ability to innovate, was then used and allowed to be absorbed into those aspects that projected down and became Musk and Zuckerberg. But notice this: Elon Musk isn't really an inventor the same as Thomas Edison. Mark Zuckerberg isn't really a machine inventor. He created basically a website. So, in essence, these individuals aren't on the same level as their preceding aspects that were projected, that wasn't them but was from their tests. But the idea of innovation was there because part of their life plan was to become innovative in some way and experience leadership in some way and experience significant affluence and world attention in some way. And that's what their learning is all about. Not whether they came here to do Facebook or whether they came here to do SpaceX or PayPal or whatever. It's just to provide the opportunity to experience fame, fortune and innovation of some sort, and that's it. And this is what they came up with. So it's all part of their life plan. And if you look at things like social media, okay, people use it a lot, but 15-20 years ago it was nothing, and it's quite possible in 15-20 years time it'll be nothing again. So all this wealth that certain individuals have got may well not be there. And they may have to experience abject poverty as a result of it. Okay, so not everything is as we see it. Good questions though. Next one's from MO. How does eating GMO, genetically modified organisms, foods affect our physical body and energetic bodies? Is it worse than eating foods that are polluted by pesticides and herbicides? There's a lot of misinformation about GMO foods, specifically about whether their DNA has been modified and this sort of stuff. And it may well have been tweaked to make it more resilient to certain blight, certain bugs, viruses, etc. It may well have been tweaked to allow it to grow bigger and grow in more diverse surroundings rather than they are. And so the thing is, if it wasn't edible for us, we wouldn't be eating it. So sometimes they are good, and sometimes they're created and they're out of control. So the thing is it worse than eating foods that are full of pesticides and stuff? If these GMO foods are safe and they are not eradicating the indigenous crops, but they are providing an amount of produce that compensates for our ridiculously large population, then it's useful because it maximises the potential of the land that's being used to create them. It's significantly better than pesticides and herbicides. But in all of this stuff, at the end of the day, the best food is natural food that isn't messed with. But having said this, mankind has been manipulating the genome of crops for thousands of years. The moment we selected the best crop, the best seeds to be replanted, and ate the substandard seeds for our food, we started to select the strong in preference to the weak. So, as farmers, thousands of years ago, when we were starting to do this, we were selecting the best all the time. And that's sort of genetic modification, because it's allowing the strong to exist by our interaction, not by actually messing with the genome, but by our allowing the strong to regrow, because we're consuming the weak. And what that does is that changes the balance. It stops the plant from going through its own Darwinian evolution, because we're assisting it. We're making it go through quantum leaps. And this is what's happened sometimes with the human body, where we've had other incarnate entities and those that are disincarnate assisting with certain selections of certain bodies to allow us to incarnate on this planet and cope with changes in frequency. Hence the different races that we see on the planet, which is highly diverse in comparison to what is out in the rest of the physical universe. Okay, so next question is, would you describe the functions and effects of the slug-like entities and how other astral entities you mentioned in latest book, the psycho-spiritual healing, how are they choosing their targets? Well, slug-like entities in psycho-spiritual healing are a bit like astral entities. They depends upon the level of their own intelligence that's created through this Darwinian evolution that energies can go through, as to whether they end up being more controlling of us or whether they're just taking our energy. So these amoeba types and slug-like astral entities that are created through their own Darwinian evolution are simply just low intelligence entities, like an amoeba, like a slug, like a sea cucumber, for example, and they just look for fast and easy food, fast food, and we're fast food because we waste a lot of energy. We broadcast energy. When our chakras pull in energy, and it's used to animate and energize the gross physical and the spiritual physical aspects of our incarnate vehicle, we create a waste product, and that waste product is the aura. It's just like heat is created as a byproduct of turning a light on. Okay, it's just like when you have a radiator, a water-based radiator, and you put hot water into it. A waste product of that is the expansion of the metals, changing the properties of the metals. So they choose their targets by those that are not so protected, those that they can easily move into their energies, move past this series of auric layers, which are a bit like the magnetic fields around a magnet, which are a bit like the changes in temperature surrounding a light bulb. And if there's no resistance, they move in as close as they can do and take energy, and they take it for free. And that perpetuates them and actually helps them grow. And so they're basically just choosing those who are naturally unprotected, and that's how it works. Next question, would you explain the functions of energetic hooks? Why are they created and what are they for? How come some are more complicated and detrimental than others? Energy hooks are created by us to attract the attention of others and control them. And depending upon our desire to attract the attention or coerce somebody or control somebody, depends upon how complicated that energy hook is and how difficult it is to remove. So they're basically a function of us trying to attack or control somebody else for our own ends, our own needs, our own benefits. And you see this quite often with partnerships where one person is stronger than another, or somebody's a manager of somebody else and he's trying to get things done by using somebody else rather than do it themselves. It's a way of activating control the individual through energies, so that you link to them and they can't get away from you. And that's what it's there for. It's like you're like a fish on a hook, basically, and the person who's controlling you is playing you like the fisherman, and it's difficult to get those hooks out. Very difficult, because depending upon, as I said, depending upon how much desire that person's got. It could be charismatic desire, it could be charismatic power, it could be coercive power, it could be good negotiating power. Depends upon how deep these hooks go into it to us, and how embedded they can be, how many barbs they have, for example, and how they can, how difficult they are to remove. When I was reading The Origin Speaks, I realised that you don't have a guide. If you don't have any guides, then how about Anne and Celia? How they don't have any guides as well? Anne didn't have a guide, Celia does. And because Anne was the same true and energetic self as me, and there's more about this on the next book I'm writing about the tests, or the lack of tests, and the test of an is transient. So, but we'll go. That's in the next book, the but there's only those that are in the evolutionary cycle have a guide and helpers, basically. And it's usually, and those that are outside of it are very far and few between. There tend to be those who are here to assist others. They're a higher frequency, and they may just be here, not doing anything else other than doing a very mundane role, such as a garage mechanic or a cook, or just sweeping the streets, for example. But they may be really high frequency individuals, and so they don't need to have a guide, because they're evolved enough to not to get involved with any karmic interactions. So next question is: have you met anybody else who doesn't have a guide beside yourself? What sort of people tend to have no guides? It's usually those who are outside of the evolutionary cycle. Those entities that are incarnate, who are actually maintenance entities, who are aligned to or work with and are part of, but are feeding back to the elementals, who are maintenance entities that work on the gross physical aspect and the astral aspects of this particular planet and other planets. They also don't have a guide, because they're not part of the evolutionary cycle. They're in service. So those entities that are in service don't have a guide. Those entities that are in the evolutionary cycle do have a guide, because they need help. And any entity that is in the evolutionary cycle and is incarnating into a different environment, with low frequency environment, needs to have a guide and helpers to help them navigate through the choices they've got to make, to be able to allow them to do the goalposts associated with their life plan. Okay. Right, next question is from WP, and I think these arrived today, so it's just in time. So, in our first full dimensional existence, we experience the world in three dimensions, which is a metric: length, width, and height. And that experience is really all going on in and through our body and mind. So maybe our perception of a three-dimensional world is an illusion. E.g., when we are asleep, the world disappears, so we're actually experiencing 3 dimensions, or we're dreaming that we're experiencing 3 dimensions. I.e., does the world and its inhabitants create our perception of it, or do we create our perception of the world? Maslow's hierarchy comes to mind here also. When our forebearers had to find food and shelter just to survive each day, no time to think deep thoughts. Yes, again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a very good way of describing some of the things that our ego makes us focus on when the gross physical form is in danger. Definitely. In effect, when we are asleep, our aspectual soul moves out of the body and does what it does. It may have other roles to play. It may just decide to have a look around, see what's going on. Mostly they've got roles to play though. But when that happens, it moves into the higher frequency levels, or I should say, those that are above the gross physical, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, which are the lower astral, the upper lower astral, the lower upper astral, and the upper astral levels, and sometimes out of that into the multiverse. And so that focus that we have on a subconscious, subliminal, and automatic sense of the need for this particular aspect of gross physicality to be in existence is no longer there. And so when we move out of the body, it's not there. However, sometimes when we have interactions with other entities, we have a translation factor that comes into play that puts everything in a similar vein to that which we experience when we are so-called awake in our incarnations, i.e. where eyes are open and we're interacting with others and the environment. So we perceive a world that's similar to what we've experienced because it's a translation, and because normally we don't go too far away from our incarnate vehicle. If we move away from our incarnate vehicle significantly enough, then if we do remember those excursions, then we sometimes get some really wild and weird memories, because sometimes, in fact an awful lot of the time, what we experience is not translatable very easily into our human database of experiences, and therefore can't be related in that way. And so we sometimes get really bizarre dreams because they're the interpretations of what we've been doing whilst we're out of the body. So when we are out of the body, we are usually translating into that which we experience in the incarnate state. If we're in a place where the level of translation can be achieved, or it can't be. If it can't be achieved, then we have a dreamless state. But usually, when we are asleep and we're no longer focused on this environment, those around us are still focused on it in some way, shape, or form. So the event space is maintained, and the reality within the event space is maintained, and so therefore the content is maintained, because it's not just reliant upon us; it's reliant upon all the population to maintain it. And so, as we have a rest and have our sleep, we no longer in the background focus on it, or need its existence, but those around us might still be awake, and therefore do need its existence, and it's still perpetuated in a automatic function. Okay, next question. In the second dimensional universes, how are those experienced? Non-physical, or so no dimensions per se, but same question, are there entities experiencing the structure of the second full dimensional universes, or are they dreaming that they are doing so? It seems like regardless of the full dimensional or universe, all experience is a function of different levels of awareness. That is a good response. All experience is a function of different levels of awareness. So irrespective of where we are, let's say the second dimension, second full dimension within the multiverse, and the 36 universes that are in there, that are supported by the 36 frequency levels, are experienced in a way which is consistent to the collective creativity of those entities that are within them. Whether there is a likeness to the Earth-based environment depends upon how many individuals are in there who want to create that. Whether it is similar to a liquid environment, or a gaseous environment, or a purely energetic environment, or a formless environment, or full of form environment, or a solid environment, is dependent upon the individuals who occupy it and what they collectively want to experience and how they want to experience it. So, and again, it's maintained. When a soul is not focused on the maintenance, or should I say subconsciously focused on the maintenance of the environment, then another soul is doing them for it. So there's always enough souls there to maintain the structure of what's there. It's a bit like always having somebody change the donkey when the donkey's rotating round and on a millstone. When the donkey gets tired, another donkey takes over. So it's always happening. There's always a soul or a group of souls somewhere who are finishing their shift, so to speak, and starting their shift and halfway through their shift. But again, it's difficult for us to interpret into human terms what a soul or an aspect would experience in one of those universes that are within the second full dimension, because it can be completely different, or it could be exactly the same, because the souls decide to create an environment which is the same as the Earth or the same as the physical universe, including galaxies, etc. And sometimes they do. Sometimes those expressions are in very small pockets within those universes. So you might get multiplicity different environments that are expressed within one particular universe, and we don't even know what the content of our universe is yet. We just know there's planets and atoms and galaxies and nebula. We don't know what's in the fourth frequency because we haven't got the technology to see it. We don't know what's in the fifth. We don't know what's in the sixth. We don't know what's in the seventh. So we just have to use our imagination and know that whatever it is being experienced as a function of that which was created by the entities that's in there. And it's created in a way that's allowing them to experience, learn and evolve in a diverse way, in a complete way, and a balanced way. Okay. So last question. In our world, on planet Earth, are all events and experiences caused by so-called natural causes and humans created those events and experiences, e.g. wars, disease, technological advancements, arts, spiritual growth, sciences, etc.? Or are there also interventions from outside of these causes? E.g. Allied forces in World War II were victorious, but it didn't have to be that way. The Third Reich could be thriving now. Is that because of the Allies' determination to defeat a destructive ideology, or because of external otherworldly intervention? That's an excellent question. Let me just meditate on it a moment. There's two parts to the answer. First part is that we have got individualised free will to experience, learn and evolve individually and collectively in a way which is beneficial to us. And that means that we can go down the dark hole as well as come out of the dark hole into the light. And we are allowed to do so-called good things and bad things because the idea is that we choose eventually the correct way, which is to be of service or to be respectful or to be, caring and sharing and loving. But in doing so, we need to understand sometimes that there are other ways that mean we don't go down that road, and the result of that is aggression, anxiety, depression, destruction. And so we're given this Adam and Eve opportunity to choose. Do we choose to have individual free will, or do we choose to obey Source? And if we chose to obey Source, we'd have been given much more freedom than we would have done if we'd have gone with free will. Okay, because that's an example. We know that free will was a function of something which we knew would create an accelerated level of evolutionary progression, and that that soul that we classify as Lucifer also knew through its projections through the Akashic records that potentially we could go down the frequencies as well, but that was withheld with the council of souls that were, shall we say, governing the possibility of individualized free will. And so we're fed certain things. Certain souls are, let's say, embedded with certain knowledge or certain feelings or certain desires to become great inventors or great reformers, for example, and others are coming to be great antagonists, for example, as well. But sometimes there are little spanners that are put in the works as well to change the way things happen. There are entities that work, there are maintenance entities that work, who are able to change event streams or the course of realities and course of sort of future lines, what we call future timelines, etc. And so sometimes it's us, and sometimes it's the maintenance entities that change the way, because they can see that some directions that we go into are not going to be of benefit to us and may end up being totally self-destructive. Whereas they can leave us to do certain things because they know that eventually we'll understand that what we're doing is not the right way to do it. It's not good, or it's not optimal for our own progression, our own evolution progression. And so sometimes there is interaction. I'm not going to say interference. There is interaction on different levels. It could be gross physical interaction. It could be spiritual physical interaction, i.e. the frequencies above the three gross physical frequencies. There's still nevertheless incarnation, but is outside of our detectable range, i.e. we can't see, smell, taste or feel it, or detect it with our machines, because they're all based upon our five senses. And sometimes those otherworldly interactions are from the maintenance entities, or other souls that are still in the energetic. So there's no one answer to that. It's just that we are allowed to play in the playground that is the earth. And sometimes what we do in the playground is of benefit, and sometimes what we do in the playground isn't of benefit, and we're guided to move in a different direction. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. It's probably not the direct answer that WP would have liked, but basically it is it's the best way I can describe it from what I'm being given, as I sort of channel the information whilst we are reading the questions. Okay, so let's get on to the requested meditation of healing others. Okay. So if you ignore my creaky chair, I do need to buy a new one, but it's, to be honest, it's still working, so why replace that, which can still work for a few more years. So sit straight in your chair, feet flat on the ground, back straight, head upright, hands faced palms upright on the upper thighs. Eyes closed, and gently focus on the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And I want you to just focus on somebody, not yourselves for the moment, but just focus on somebody that you feel needs healing. Now, those of you who've bought the psycho-spiritual healing will recognise there's lots of different techniques to heal a person. And these are all interactions, physical interactions. But there are other ways that are purely spiritual-physical. Let's call it reprogramming, that allow us to heal people. And one of those is almost aligned to being in abundance. For if we see somebody who's ill, then we can focus on them, ask them to be surrounded by the healing energies of the source, and then just focus on them. See them in their most fit state, their disease-free state, their virus-free state, their damage-free state. Doesn't matter what they've had, if it's a cancer or COVID-19 or flu or influenza or tsetse fever or malaria or bowel cancer or peritonitis or etc., etc., etc. if you pick on somebody that you know is ill, just look at them in your mind's eye and see them in a time, or you can use your mentally spoken word to create the same thing. It does the same job. You don't need to see things. You can just verbalize what you want to experience, what you want to do. Just see them as being disease-free, virus-free, damage-free, psychologically sound. Just see them as being a completely perfect individual. Completely perfect individual. Just see that person as being of good health, as you would expect them to see if they were disease-free, psychologically sturdy and robust, virus-free, damage-free, even younger. Even younger. When we use the abundance meditation, we see, feel it, taste it, touch it, and are it. We don't think it's going to happen, believe it's going to happen, want it to happen, wish it's going to happen. We know it's happening. We know it's happened. We know it's now. And that's the same with healing somebody. Just see their damage no longer being there. Know that their disease is no longer there. Know that their mental confusion is no longer there. Just be with them. Picture or use your mentally spoken words to achieve the same thing, that person is a picture of health, physical health, mental health. Their form, their body is in perfect condition. There's no damage. See everything as being not so much healed, but being in a perfect state of existence. Every time you think of a person that you want to get healed, including yourself, just use this feeling of being in abundance, but use it instead in terms of knowing that they're better, that they were never ill, they didn't have a virus, didn't have a disease. The disease is no longer there. It's not part of their thought process, not part of your thought process. The damage is no longer there. There are no cuts and grazes on their knees or their elbows. There are no broken bones. There are no punctured lungs or, shall we say, damaged eyes. There is just perfection. Know, be, see the well-being of the individual. There's no room for doubt, there's just knowingness. For those of you who saw a long time ago, and you can still buy it on DVD, the film Jesus of Nazareth, where Ernest Borgnine as a centurion approached Jesus and asked him to heal his servant who was like a son to him. And Jesus said he'd come to his house. And Ernest Borgnine said, Jesus of course was Robert Powell, and Ernest Borgnine was a centurion, Roman centurion. And he said, no, you don't need to come to my house. I'm not worthy of you coming to my house. I just know that if you give the word that he'll be healed, then I know it will happen. And that was his faith, because he knew that the Jesus character could do it. And as he was walking back towards his house, there was a cry came from his house that a miracle had happened, and that his servant had awakened and was no longer ill or dying. He knew that in that instance, the Jesus character was capable of healing on a profound level. He didn't doubt it. He knew. He didn't need Jesus to be there in the room to do it. He knew that he could just do it by pure thought. That's where we should be, knowing that our pure thought, our desire, intention and action creates the healing condition in the person we want to be healed by knowing that they already are healed. We don't doubt. We don't conjecture about it. We don't argue about it. We don't argue to see the logic about it. We just know. Bring that knowingness and surround the person that you want healed. And know that they already are healed. The moment you think about them, start to think about them, the desire and the intention creates the thought, and the action is the healing, and the healing's already done. Just feel within you how good that feels, that you know it's happened. The ego will tell you that it needs to have physical proof. You'll get that, but you don't need it now. Dismiss it. Master your ego. Master the fear of needing to have physical proof. Know that your your desire and your intention to heal the person automatically creates the thought and the action. The healing process has already happened. So this process in your mind, and the person that you've used in your exercise for this meditation today, fully healed, start to slowly come back into your body, or wherever you've been while you're doing this, or stay in the room. Start to come back into the room properly, slowly open the eyes, and take a drink of water to help ground you. And thank you for participating in this month's Satsanga, this July Satsanga, held on the 31st of July. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all in August. And the date in August is, I'm just going to check, is going to be the 28th of August for the next Satsanga. So looking forward to interacting with you energetically then. So until next time, God bless you all and Namaste.
Did you see the aliens in Crete?